Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening. Um, Today, we are going to have our second event of our MICCAI Student Board webinar series, and we'll be discussing practical recipes for creating effective presentations. We welcome our speaker, Emanuele Trucco from University of Dundee. Before giving the floor to our speaker, I would like to say a few words about MICCAI Student Board, the events we organize, and what is it about. So MICCAI Student Board is a student initiative since 2010, and our goal is to stimulate the involvement of students, enhance student networking in the community, and advise MICCAI Board on matters of relevance for students. We are a diverse group of members in Student Board. I'm Shalja, I'm the webinar officers. And together today we have Camila, who is the president of MICCAI Student Board. And together we'll be moderating this webinar today. We organize a lot of events before conference throughout the year, as well as many events during the conference. And this year also we will have academia and industry event, social events, and we have introduced a new event, MICCAI Thesis Madness, which we'll be talking about, and also sports events during the conference. We also organize MICCAI Education Challenge, which is an initiative of Student Board since 2014, where anyone can submit tutorial and educational materials relevant to the MICCAI topics, and submission can be in any format. This year we have got a record number of submission, and all the submission will be available online. You can check MICCAI Student Board website to look at the submission, and the winner will be announced during the MICCAI conference. This year, we have a new event, which is MICCAI Thesis Madness, which gives an opportunity to recent graduates to spotlight their thesis and research journey in 3 minutes. So the deadline is nearby. So if you are still ready for submitting an abstract, please go ahead and do that. You can see the detail in our website, and also you can email us if you have any question. Please visit our website to get an update on whatever events we are organizing. Follow us on social media. We are there on Twitter, MICCAI Group in Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. So without further delay, I would like to welcome Dr. Emanuele Trucco again, and let's hear from him about practical recipes for creating effective presentations. So I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Shalja, for the very nice words and introduction, useful information about the society. So good, whatever, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much to the board, first of all, for inviting me and having me. I have to say, again, this talk was delivered in 2021 to the previous generation of your board, I imagine. And so with some variations, I have tried to recycle it and improve it a little bit. Okay, so to the audience, we've had a little bit of hiccups technologically, of course, and so I'll try to share my screen. It may not happen, in which case Shalja kindly has a copy of my slides and she'll try, but let me try to do this first. Okay, so here's the presentation. And here's the sharing. Okay, so the screen share is loading right now. These things always happen to technologists, you know.
Yeah.
In a faculty of humanities, I'm sure things work just completely smoothly. They challenges us as technologists. So it's still loading. Give it. Okay, can you see my screen?
I No, I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. So
In
maybe
which case,
I'll go ahead and share
yeah, please,
my
exactly. That's
screen.
the end of the attempt. Apologies to the audience. Okay.
So not this one.
Oops, this is not the right one.
Yeah. Um,
Right. From the beginning.
yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so basic recipe for effective oral presentations. Next slide, please. Okay, and try to click once more. Okay, doesn't matter. Right, no, let's see. Okay, thank you very much. So, quick overview of the contents, first of all. Two things, essentially. This is a recipe. It is not a learned talk about the psychology of presentations and so on. This is essentially what I have distilled in my years of career, essentially giving presentations of various types and so on. It's divided very practically in these 5 sections. Of course, I'll take you through. And then some extra thoughts, which are, I think, rather important of 3 different kinds. The first one sounds like the Liverpool Football Club, you'll never walk alone. There are various aspects which are important to remember that when you prepare slides which involve other people, the obvious points about audiences, and I think something which is enormously important this day about the importance of the clarity of communicate science these days, clearly and effectively. Okay, next, please. So let me, before anything else, clarify a couple of assumptions I made in preparing this little seminar and a couple of disclaimers. First of all, I make the assumptions that we refer to technical talks, okay, like talks you would give to MICCAI, to Middle, to essentially any venue where you can talk shop technical. So that means from the point of view of the audience, you know that the audience will understand your technical words, okay? The second thing is I assume that these are talks you give with slides. This is not necessarily the case. You all know that sometimes, rarely in our field, but sometimes, maybe when you become old, you're invited to give talks without slides. Okay, that of course removes completely the visual aspects and the challenge of preparing engaging slides and so on, which is a lot of what we'll be talking again about today, but preserves the very important point of communicating effectively, of which we're talking today. And the final thing, which is a subset of the first, if you like, is that the audience is peers. So people who understand what you're talking about, if you start talking, I do not know, double integrals, cost functions, and architectures. In terms of disclaimers, I want to stress honestly that these are my ideas and experience. And I hope that as I speak, it will become clear that many people arguably share my opinion. And if you want to go beyond this little practical set of rules, take them as suggestions, recommendations. There's, of course, plenty of stuff on the web, but there's plenty of confusing stuff also on the web. So I think, perhaps modestly, it's not bad to have some very, very succinct principles that if you use them, you cannot go wrong. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start, let's finish the introductory part with the top-down recipe. These 5 parts, apart from the thoughts, which I'm presenting to you today, are essentially a sequential protocol, okay? We have to think of these things typically in sequence, and that is also the beauty of a recipe, of a practical recipe. There's nothing here we should confuse people, okay? Hopefully everything is very linear, as in this diagram. And of course, the metaphor on the right is due to the fact that I'm Italian and I come from the hometown of Pesto, Genova, from where I'm talking to you in this moment. So I had to include the picture. Next slide, please. No more Pesto. Okay, so let's take these 5 points in sequence. First of all, close the computer, close the laptop, go away from the computer, think, okay? The most important and first thing to do is to decide your message. And your messages normally in a talk, like a conference talk, are never more than 2, 3 maximum. This is important because when, and I'm thinking particularly of myself at the beginning of my career, you are animated by great enthusiasm and you feel everything must be said, everything, okay? And the risk of that is that you end up including details which are not as important given the time you have to communicate the main messages. So my strong recommendation, before anything else, just think of what are the key messages and you have to organize the talk around those, okay? So this is very crucial. Point number 1. For instance, if you present a paper at MICCAI, as many of you will do or have done already. That's a fantastic situation because you have the paper already. You've done a lot of thinking already. You've written what the contribution are already. And again, in the paper, you will not have 25 contribution. If you have, think again, you will have 2 or 3, right? So that's easy. But sometimes you're called to give talks where you don't have a supporting paper, okay? So this phase is very important. Next slide, please. The second thing is to the risk, at the risk of sounding really trivial in what I'm saying, before you start writing anything, I strongly suggest to do a couple of arithmetics calculation and dimension your talk, okay? The slides obviously fall into categories. Call these categories whatever you want, primary, accessory, I don't care. But the important thing is that you have obviously 2 types of slides. One are things that you show for a moment and you move on. The title, the acknowledgements, the logo of the funding body. This you show, you make a comment, ciao, and you move on. But the bulk of the slides are what I call, I don't care what you call them, the primary slide, the technical content. This is what the formula applies to, okay? You are given always a constraint, which is the maximum time you have, right? That's T here. You always told 15 minutes plus discussion, 20 minutes plus discussion, 40 minutes plus discussion. That you cannot change, right? So very trivially, I am suggesting, look at your contents. You've done it before, right? In the previous step, you decided, okay, these are the 3 things I want to say. Obviously, these are not 3 slides. You will articulate things, right? Let's try to say this in 10 slides. That means I have T seconds per slide, okay? And that the game becomes to change S. Clearly 50 slides will not do for 50 minutes, 1 slide will not do. So in between there's a sweet spot, okay, that you can experiment with easily before you have all the slides. So aim to, this is the name of the game, you aim to 12 slides because you feel that you've calculated that will give you 2 minutes per slide and you feel that on average that is right. Don't just start writing slides, okay? Aim to a number, which brings us to the next point. Now you have the messages you want to communicate, 2 maximum 3. Now you have an average time per slide, like a couple of minutes. Next, please. And now you draft your slides, okay? For which we have to go slightly into detail of how you write your slides. Obviously, you concentrate on your key messages, right? Whatever message you put in a slide, 1 message per slide. And again, it's very easy, I believe, to be tempted at least to put a graph and the comments of the graph and the things that the graph suggests to go to for future works in the same slides. Remember that it is a fact that the more you put on slides, the higher the likelihood, some say the probability, that people lose attention, okay? Remember that, I mean, you know this very well, because we all do that. We go to conferences, we sit in an audience with a laptop, and some of us read email, and some of us do something else, and some of us look at where the next hotel is for the next conference, okay? And the more these people raise their eyes and look at your slides and see a kind of oceans of symbols of graphs, point size 9 and things like that, the more they will go back to their hotel for the next conference. Okay, this sounds all, I'm presenting this very informally, but this is true. Okay, so concentrate, one message per slide, clear. It means the language you use, this is my recommendation, is direct, is concise, is keywords, and there are no intricate diagrams. Okay, there are diagrams, but you don't write prose. So take, for instance, these are examples, simple direct language, right? I could have written, you should organize your slides in a simple direct language. I would have used 12 words probably instead of 3, and I wouldn't have added anything. Okay, with the advantage that if you use very, very simple short keywords, you do not clutter the slide, and in any case, you have to comment. These slides are not, this is something which is, we all know that, but acting consequently is not obvious. Slides are not a thesis, something that people read. They're not a paper. Okay, a paper, a thesis, a written document is something which is completely independent. It must be understood in its own right, per se. But a set of slides is something you talk to. So there's no need to write, a novel. In fact, it's very dangerous to write a novel because people go back to the homepage of the hotel. So focused, one message per slide. Clear, direct keywords, okay? And then, importantly, whatever you write, have it checked, right? We'll go back to this point. Check it. Make sure that your statement I still, in the 21st century, I still go to conferences and find, I'm sorry to sound really old and cantankerous, but I still find spelling errors in slides. Guys, and ladies, there's no justification. How many spelling checkers are there? It doesn't look good for you. Okay, so this is very simple, very trivial, but we have about 1,000 trivial things to remember when we prepare a presentation. Okay, so check your statement, have them checked by somebody else. And if possible, and I do not claim at all that this presentation is catchy, but try to make it, uncluttered and also visually appealing. A technical presentation is not an industrial presentation where you have, dancing elephants and things like that, so that investors give you money. I have the most amusing experiences in this field, because what I consider good practice for presenting to my colleagues is considered very bad when you present to investors. But anyway, sorry, this is by the by. Focused, clear, correct, and catchy. Okay. On the right, you have two examples of, these are not necessarily, the top one is not a slide, it's just a joke. The bottom one is a slide. And I think this is terrible, because who has the time to read the text on the left? And the only message they get from the slides is, okay, this is the architecture, but I cannot even read. Okay, so this is point number 3. Next one, please. Super important. You have before done this very little calculations whereby you were given the constraints, the maximum time you have. You felt that, okay, you can invert the calculation and say, I think I need about 2 minutes per slide. How many slides do I get? And you aim for that number of slides, okay? However, when you deliver the slides, there's another aspect of the timing that you need to consider, and that is, where am I in the presentation? Okay, you begin to talk, you go through, you know how many slides you have, but when you begin to present the slides, and this is classic at the beginning, I remember I was absolutely terrible in this at the beginning, and maybe I still am, you just get, the risk is that you get completely taken by one slide, and you delve into it, and you get late. Most of us have had that experience. So practical tricks to avoid this, many of you know these things, is use a content bar, like at the top here. okay, that automatically tells you at which part of the presentation you are. In this moment, I know how much time has gone because I got a watch near me, and I know that I'm slightly past the half of the presentation. Not only that, but okay, the technical problems prevent me from demonstrating this. I find it very useful to have a little widget which tells me how much time it has passed since I started on this slide. So those two bars you see at the bottom were carefully engineered in PowerPoint slides, which would fill with colors 1 minute each to give me 2 minutes. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because the version I sent to Sharjah didn't work. But, you know, I'm sure that you know plenty of clever tricks. That is very useful. So you have, if you like, two defenses against the risk of overrunning. One is where you are in the slides, like at the top here, and the other whether you're talking too much on a single slide with these timers. Okay, but this is very practical, but it makes a difference between embarrassment and a successfully timed talk. Okay, so next, please. We now come to the super important point of rehearsing. Now, I am the first one to be aware of the, how can I say, the constraints of real life. You know, you have 5 things to do at the same time, and preparing the talk is one. And, you know, people are pressing you to do this, do that, deliver a tutorial, take, for some of you, you know, take the children to nursery, do this, do that. And who has time to rehearse? Well, it pays off a lot. And I believe that, you know, in a research group, it would be that like there are journal clubs, which are a very good idea. I hope everybody agrees. A very good idea is when you have people going to a conference, particularly PhD students who need training, organize sessions as part of the journal club, maybe, to deliver the talk with feedback. Okay, this is very important because I think we all had the experience that even if you rehearse to yourself alone, the psychological state in which you're in is very different from being on a podium delivering to an audience, you know, this post-COVID era, delivering to an audience full of people who look at you. And everybody reacts in, I mean, people can be clustered, okay? But psychological reactions of human beings asked to do something in front of other human beings, to be general, these are very different. There are people who hate delivering talks. There are people who love delivering talks, and then everything in between, okay? So, too many words. The key message in practice here is it's very different to try to time yourself. The result when you time yourself talking to yourself, you know, talking to the talks and there's nobody around, the result is different in general, sometimes significantly different from the time you obtain when talking in a rehearsal session to a friendly audience even, okay? So do that, please. Ideally get a mix of specialists and not, okay? Not specialist does not mean, of course, totally ignoramus in the topics of your talk, but, you know, educated colleagues, educated layperson who do not do exactly your work, but distinguish a neural network from, you know, from a fish shop or something like that. Time yourself, of course, and invite feedback. This is obvious if you have a friendly audience. Any feedback is good feedback, okay? The people in your talk, in your audience, friendly audience, who understand the ins and outs of your technical contents, they will be precious in saying, look, I don't think that sum symbol without indices is a good idea. This formula is confusing. The people who understand vaguely, who are important, but do not go into the details, they will be able to say, well, you know, you had this slide was too crammed, too much material, or do you realize you've gone 30 minutes, 30 seconds overboard for each slide? They will concentrate their attention on something else. It's good to have both, okay? And then, at the risk of contradicting myself, you don't have to listen to everybody. You have to collect feedback from everybody, okay? And then you have to exercise, if you're a PhD student, maybe use your supervisor, you have to exercise critical judgment, right? It's every feedback is good feedback to be collected. And then, of course, you can override some suggestions. It's obvious, like when you get feedback on papers, it's not different. At the risk of sounding over repetitious, I would encourage everybody, short of really experienced people, but there's always something to learn, to do these rehearsals. And in experience of our research group, doing these things as part of the regularly scheduled slot for a journal club works a treat, because people do not feel that they have to add anything else to the other 15 deadlines they have already on their diaries. Okay. That is pretty much the framework of a very simple recipe. However, simple as it may be, I draw your attention, if you will want to go back to this and trying to implement something, it's simple, but it's meant to be simple, but it contains everything you need. All the rest is, your style. If you make a mistake on some of these things, which I told you, not because I told you, but you're probably either, again, talk too much, get confusing slides, you'll make some mistakes, right? Then it is absolutely important to stress that this simple practical recipe, it's personal experience, of course, but it's not prescriptive. I think that if you don't follow one way or another, something will go wrong. But it's not prescriptive. At the end of the day, it is very important that you develop your own style. And people, I think that part of the beauty of this world is that we are all different. I've seen it's a clustering problem when you analyze the style of presentations that you see in conference. You can cluster presenters. There are the people who have these fantastic slides, very clear, very personal. They have these touches. You can copy people, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. Not copy contents, clearly, not republishing somebody else's idea. But style of presentation, a lot of good idea to be taken here and there. And I'm interested in people in addition to science and technology. So I really find it fascinating to see the variety. There's a lot to learn from a lot of people. And MICCAI, in particular, is a reasonably large conference. If you go to the orals, you'll see it all, or nearly. Okay, enough said about that. Last section, please. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so here is where I go a little bit more general. So that, the rules, the recipe has been presented. Let me tell you something more, which again is even more personal, but I think it is important. You can read all sorts of books and articles and websites and blogs and whatever about preparing slides, preparing posters and blah, blah. Okay. But if you stand back and you think what you're trying to do, and I think this is very important, if you stand back, you realize that at the end of the day, the goal, the ultimate goal, is not preparing slides, is not writing a paper, is not preparing a poster, is to communicate ideas. So the ultimate parameter of success is not, if you like, the number of proxy that I have presented. You are on time, the slides are not cluttered, the font is legible. These are all enabling conditions. But at the end of the day, you are judged on whether people understood what you say or not. Okay? If people understand the message, not what you say in terms of words, okay? If people understand the message, they like your algorithm, don't like your algorithm, but they have understood. Okay? The result of discussion, that is it. That you have achieved your goal. Okay? Then the style of the presentation is I hope this may sound trivial, but it is very easy to think I am preparing the slides. I concentrate on the slides. there is one message or two that you want to make clear. That is your ultimate parameter. It's a bit like validation on outcome. Many of you probably, the validation has always been one of my pet topics. That there are essentially two paradigms for validating a medical image analysis or image data analysis algorithm. I speak of images because that's what I know better. One is to test each module per se, or the important ones, okay? You're detecting, I don't know, microcalcifications, right? Then you ask somebody to circle all the microcalcification, and that is a very important thing, but also very time-consuming and so on, for the purpose of making a decision. This patient must be referred to a specialist or not. Or you can decide on outcome that the only thing which is important is to make the right decision. So what you need in the first place are the labels from a number of specialists which say refer or not refer. And nobody spends the best years of their life circling a microcalcification, okay? This is useful too. But I'm using this metaphor. Well, this is not a metaphor. This is what happens in reality as in the big field of validation, okay? But because here, your outcome is whether or not people have followed what you say, right? That's the outcome. And the equivalent of circling microcalcification as annotations is all the things I mentioned before, right? Okay. So eventually you will develop your own style, or you have already developed your own style. Just make sure that, none of the basic mistakes sort of creep in your posters, your slides, your presentations, and so on. The next point about different audiences is something that I hope you are all aware of, but it's something that is very important to remind, and it's in any good manual of presenting, how to present, how to communicate effectively. The same message, the same thing must be presented differently to audience with different backgrounds. Okay, I do not know, many of you presumably have written already grant proposals. Okay, if you write grant proposals, for instance, to charities, so in the UK, this would be, I do not know, things like the Wellcome Trust, Fight for Sight. In America, I'm not entirely sure, but the form that you must fill in has a lot of technical things. Do you have enough power in your statistical methods? What are the algorithms? Describe the details of the cohort of patients. But at the beginning, there's always, in this type of proposals, a section which is called lay abstract, L-A-Y. Okay, abstract for people who are not technical experts in your field, right? And this must be prepared with different words. Similarly, I know that in the vast majority of cases, we in our field present to each other, right? You talk to conferences, and in conferences, you expect people to understand the technicalities. However, a very important part of training, and this leads me to the next point, a very important part of the training of a scientist, and I go beyond medical image analysis here. Anybody who deals, especially quantitative science, as we do, okay, in engineering, is to learn to communicate not only to our peers in terms of background, okay, but also to people who do not have our background, right? So, for example, an important part of this training in practice is to give public engagement talks, as they are called in the UK. Go and talk to people about your work, people who do not know but are interested anyway, but who do not know about machine learning, right? This is very important, because the more you train yourself to explain in technical terms and in non-technical terms, the more you yourself understand about your topic, the more you yourself will see aspects that you may not have thought of necessarily, which may be particularly important for the applications of what you do. Now, I am totally aware of the fact that in the initial stages of a career, what's important is not public engagement talks. What's important are papers in IEEE TMI, papers in Middle, papers in MICCAI. Yes, I knew that, okay? And that is the kind of presentation that inevitably we have to hone and perfect. But, and this leads me to the next point, if we only talk in terms which are difficult to understand for people who may be affected by what we do, like we develop software apps for dermatology, for ophthalmology, for any ology in medicines, okay? These people are the receiving end of what we do. And okay, you know, these people do not review our MICCAI paper. But once our MICCAI paper is accepted and another 55 papers or so, 100 and so on, and we start a company or we get bought out by, I do not know, Canon or whatever it is, or Google, and they put a product on the market or on the web, that begins to affect people. And these people may have ideas which you do not share, because you may think, oh, wait a second, I never thought something like that. You know, I never wanted to do that. I am a scientist. That's not good enough anymore, boys and girls, and anybody else in between. This is not good enough these days. So the red part there is it is increasingly important today to train ourselves, me first, to communicate science clearly and convincingly, right, to non-scientists. To scientists is easy, I would say. People who understand what a nonlinearity in a neural network is, no problem. But you cannot express yourselves in terms of nonlinear ReLU functions or whatever with somebody who comes to you and say, I think your software will creep into the network and conquer the world and whatever. This is, what? You know, there are microchips in vaccines and things like that. These things happen, okay? So, I'm sorry, I get a bit overheated, let's say, not only because I'm Italian, but because I really think that it is super important that we as a community, MICCAI scientists, get our act together from any stage, the beginning, the end, anything in between, okay, to communicate that we're not creating monsters. And if anybody, because this may happen, okay, if anybody persuades us that there may be any danger, do not go back into, oh, my ReLU takes care of that. No, you know, think of that honestly, start a debate, publish your paper, priority number one. But don't forget, because we are living increasingly in a society which is varied, and MICCAI, for once, is a community of people who I believe has an enormously important role. We deal with medical applications, okay? We are at the front of a potential, how can I say, difficult relationship with some people, okay? And we must be prepared. We must be prepared to be honest, engaging, and try to persuade people that our results are these and not else, and you reason in terms of statistics, and you cannot conclude, because there's too much of this. You know, statistics is a great example. You cannot conclude that, I do not know, you cannot conclude that the majority of people in the UK do something with a sample of 150 people taken in a suburb of London. Okay, right, next slide. So, with this catchy picture of myself, one final important message, a sense of humor. I do not know whether you take this as a sense of humor or not, but you know, whatever this is, my recommendation is try to smile about yourself. Always. You can make fantastic things. I'm sure that many of you will become super famous, are already super famous, will make very complicated things, will climb stardom and so on. Let me tell you this. I'm sorry, take it from an old man. Be prepared to smile about yourself. Okay, don't belittle what you do, but you know, be prepared with a sense of irony. It helps a lot. It takes you a long way. It saves a lot of headaches, and then you have to take medicines. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much,
Wonderful.
Dr. Trucco, for the insightful talk. And we are now open for questions. And yeah, Camila, can you go ahead and take the questions?
Definitely. Also from my side, thank you so much, Dr. Trucco, for being with us again. And
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Definitely. And thank you so much. And yeah, just I love your focus on really just delivering the main message, which is the most important thing. And I absolutely agree with you on the importance of trying to make sure that the information that we try to give reaches as many people as possible.
Thank you, Camila.
Okay. So let me go ahead with the first question in the Q&A box. And yes, so everybody who is participating, please post your questions in the Q&A box, or you can also send us a message through the chat. So the first question.
Sorry, there's a hand
No,
raised,
go ahead.
which is not a protocol.
Oh, that's also fine. Let me see, definitely. So one attendee has a hand raised. I don't believe I can let that person speak, so I think it would be better if you would post a question in the chat, please. Okay, they lowered it. Exactly. Okay, so the first question is, in MICCAI presentations, large tables of results are frequently displayed, but they often can be clearly read during the presentation itself. What are some effective ways to visually illustrate impressive quantitative performance for such presentations?
Thank you. Excellent question. I have a straightforward answer to that. Graphs. If you have in the paper, although don't go overboard, of course, you have space to present a reasonably complex table. Don't go overboard, because even reviewers are busy people. But when you speak, my warm recommendation is try to capture your results in graphs, show them visually, right? Add some highlight some numbers, right? But graphics says it all much quicker. And then you can always remember, you talk to your slides, you point people to the paper, right? Because again, showing a big table of numbers, normally you can highlight things perhaps, but it doesn't always work. Good question.
Definitely, I agree 100%. All right, the next question is, I found in my experience, sometimes the effort on iterating a presentation may not be cost effective, as the message of the presentation may be quickly out of date due to the quick progress in the community. How to deal with this situation?
So this refers to a situation where, like me, you have a talk which you delivered a year ago and you deliver it again? Yes?
Yeah, I believe that's the question. So a talk that you may update parts of, but which is...
So if that is correct, I agree that things go... well, this is an interesting question. Thank you very much. We have to agree on what it means being surpassed, okay? Because I think personally that there's a lot of noise in the literature, okay? There's I forgot a figure, but you probably remember somewhere it appeared the number of papers which are published in our field, medical image analysis in general, every day, including archive, bioarchive, and the official places, is ludicrous. You know, even if you didn't do anything else but reading, you cannot read them all, right? So yes, things move forward, but faster. But if you have given a presentation 6 months ago, I think the best thing to do is not throwing it away in panic because there's 3,000 papers have appeared in between, and it's just to, because you will keep, I assume, you keep reading the literature. Okay, you will have, and also, in consultation with colleagues, friends, supervisors, or whatever, you have an idea of the 5 or 6, 10 papers which really make a difference in the last 6 months. You don't have to read, for instance, when swing transformers came around, and immediately there was this flurry of papers on stage, you don't have to read them all, right? And in any case, so that's my answer. Postscriptum or footnote, we cannot escape the fact that we live in a sort of, we work, sorry, in a sort of evolutionary environment. Okay, there is no puppeteer who decides who becomes famous, who would not, what is the next big thing and what not. There are examples, even in the history of computer vision, of really excellent ideas which got published in those days. There were, I'm thinking of the 80s, there was no Google, there was no nothing. You had to, get interlibrary loans to read papers. And there are various examples of really good idea which got ignored for years because, they weren't noticed. Sorry, I am digressing. Okay, that's my answer.
No, definitely, I agree 100%. So basically, you recommend embracing that those new papers, at least the ones that you think are very relevant, and including those in the presentation so people are up to date. Yeah.
Show awareness. It also depends clearly. If you have time because your work progresses as papers publish, okay? So you will have done further experiments and so on. So the first thing that, once you identify the key papers you have to compare with the new papers, the first thing I would suggest to a collaborator of mine is, okay, compare your results, right? Which incidentally, again, time is limited, I guess, but would bring us to the very important question of when results are comparable. I do not know how many of you have written meta reviews. Okay, if you write a meta reviews, essentially you're trying to look at the literature and look for papers who address a certain questions. Like, I do not know, are there, my field, okay, are there quantitative properties of the geometry of the blood vessels in the retina which may suggest cardiovascular risk? Okay, and you look at the literature and you find all sorts of papers, experimental, right, meaning classifier, predictors, and so on. You cannot just take them at face value. You cannot say this paper has an AUC of 0.98 and that paper has an AUC of 0.66, the former is better. On the face of it, of one number, but there's algorithms, parameters of the algorithm, data set, size of the data sets, annotations, protocols for the annotation, who the annotators were, experienced. It's which is why writing a good meta review is not easy at all. Sorry, I tend to digress.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. Even within the same data set, how the evaluation metrics are calculated, all of these aspects.
Absolutely. Have you rewritten the code? How much code have you rewritten? Have you taken something from the web to court, entirely? Have you retuned the parameters? There's comparing thing is not easy. Sorry, it takes attention. I don't want to scare people off. It takes attention, but this is science. Science is, forgive me, I do not want to descend into politics, but I'm tempted to say this, I'll say it, and then I'll take the consequences. Science is the opposite of populism. Okay, science recognizes, excuse me, I do not want to go back. Science recognizes the world is a complex place and accepts it and embraces it. And it's not scared by it and doesn't feel that you have to shoot people, okay, because you're scared, because it's too complicated. We try to explain the world as best as we can. And I think one distinctive mark of a good scientist is that you're always aware that your explanation is probably limited. And there's a better explanation. Somebody will come along with a better system, which will have a better AUC, as long as the comparison works. Sorry,
Definitely.
I apologize. No more.
No, there's a lovely quotation to have. Science is the opposite of populism. I like that.
I'll take the consequences. Okay.
Okay.
What else?
Yes, so the following question, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I didn't understand. I didn't understand the metaphor, circling, and the other thing. What was the other thing? Also, you mentioned another conference and sounded like I think they mean middle, or some
Middle,
people say
MIDL.
MIDL.
Yes, it was an example, middle.
Exactly. I think I read this incorrectly. 1 second. I didn't understand the metaphor, circling, and the other thing. What was the other thing?
That's a bit vague. I do not have a script. I just speak to my slides. I'm sorry. Which slide was it?
I think
Yeah.
in one of the slides, you mentioned that you circle the main points, what you are trying to convey. So yeah, I don't remember what circle the other.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't remember when I mentioned middle. Maybe this person who's asking the question can elaborate a little bit more in the chat.
So they did say the metaphor. Yes. So they did mention the metaphor of annotating things. Versus,
I'm with you. Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you. All right. Yes. So this is the metaphor, the annotating on outcome. Okay. So the two things that one is a metaphor of the other that I was mentioning are, one is preparing good presentations. Okay. And the other is deciding that a medical image analysis system which has to classify patients in this needs referring to a specialist, this does not, works. Such a system works. How do you test such a system? Okay, so these are the two things I was. The second is the latter is a metaphor for the former. In what sense? In this sense that when you try to decide whether the system refer to not refer works, you need annotations. We always need annotations, okay? And what I was saying is that the obvious thing to do is supposing, for example, that the system decides refer do not refer on the basis of the number of, I am inventing here, microcalcifications in a mammogram, okay? It's just a purely fictitious example. What annotations would you need? Well, the obvious thing which springs to mind is to say, I take a few specialists, not one, and I ask them, draw me circles or whatever, I give them a protocol, annotate the image, draw on the image, show me where the microcalcification are, tell me how many they are, draw circles around them, okay? And then I can compare my microcalcification detector with these very detailed annotations, right? But the other thing you can do, which sounds a little bit more extreme, is to say, well, what do I want to do here ultimately? Is to refer the patient or not? Somehow, okay? So I'm not recommending doing this only, obviously, but taking an extreme view, you can say, okay, the only annotations I need from many doctors are refer or do not refer, okay? And I don't have to get particularly fastidious, crazy about, the detector per se. This is the metaphor. And when you prepare a presentation, I was saying the equivalent of the outcome, refer, do not refer, is have the audience understood your message or not? Have you communicated your message or not? And if yes, then okay, but you may have got something wrong. You may have talked a little bit longer. You may have had too many graphs in one slide. Okay, but they understood the message. On outcome, you've achieved your goal. That was the metaphor.
Perfect. Yes, I was super clear. And the person also said, aha, thank you very much. I now understand.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Great. So we have one more question. For new MICCAI students giving their first oral presentation, what strategies can they employ to handle nervousness and conquer stage fright?
Rehearse. There's nothing else. Try to organize, take a friendly audience, right? Your friend, your colleagues, include your, partner if necessary, if it's not or she or it is they are not scientists. Rehearse the presentation and listen, and this to feedback. And this has two advantages. One, it will train you, because you know, this stage fright that we, in different measures, most of us have or have had. In my experience, it doesn't go away with pills. You know, it just goes away with practice. At the end of the day, you do it and you do it and you do it again. At the end of the day, it becomes, okay, I have to give a presentation. I'm not over the moon about it, but I've done it another 12 times, so I know what to do. I know what to expect. That's a good thing. The more you do, the lower the probability of surprises. So the main thing is is rehearsals. Follow the recipe, you know, and rehearse as much as you can.
Definitely, 100%. I do have one last question from my side.
Of course.
I mean, in several moments, you said how important feedback is, and that all feedback is good feedback. So how do you foster this in your students? How do you encourage such a culture where it's good to receive feedback and good to give feedback? Do you say, for instance, oh, you should practice this 5 times with 5 different people?
Thank you. This is a very practical question. I like it. So first of all, I encourage people to think in terms of groups. We are lucky where I work, in the sense that clearly each student is attached to a supervisor, each postdoc is attached to a principal investigator, but we try to work as a group as much as possible. Projects intersect. Students have their own projects, but you know, they talk to each other. We have journal clubs, and things like that. So use that, I would say. Okay, what I recommend to my students is, look, you may feel alone, because in the path of a PhD, you know, there are bad moments, there are good moments, there's elation. My paper is accepted. And then there are terrible moments. It looks like everybody has got your idea at least 10 times in the literature. But, you know, these things happen. I'm aware of it. I went through it. But you're not alone, you know. And I think the people who run a research group, ideally, should encourage, this is my personal suggestion, of course, should encourage this culture as much as possible. And there is always a combination. This is what we do with our students, you know, and there's always a combination of collaboration and competition, and the proportions of this, the mutual, you know, the weights of the linear combination are very different in different groups. There are groups that are very stressful, in the sense that the competition is very strenuous within the same group. I'm not saying this is necessarily bad. I mean, if it works for that group, that's fine. There are groups like ours. I insist. I'm not saying it's not my style. Okay, but if it works, it works. And we prefer to have a mixture, weighted, skewed towards collaboration. Like our students are always. I'll try again. Our students are always encouraged, for instance, to propose challenges. MICCAI challenges, the conferences, and work together to prepare the challenges, submit to challenges if they don't organize a challenge, and so on. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and giving us so many tips, definitely. No, thank you, definitely. Yeah, we'll give it on to Shailja to close the webinar. Thank you also, everybody, for attending.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Camila. Thank you once again, Dr. Trucco, for such an amazing presentation and taking our time to speak at our webinar. Thank you, audience. And I would also like to thank MICCAI Society and MICCAI Student Board for all the support throughout the process of organizing the webinar. So we hope to see everyone in our next webinar in October. And till then, goodbye. Thank you so much.
And also in Vancouver, if I may.
Yeah, in Vancouver. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.